Hello, everyone, and good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight for some words of Dhamma from Ayya Soma. So we'll begin the night with some chanting and then a meditation, followed by the talk. So if you'd like to follow along with the chanting, we'll be chanting Ratana Sutta. You can find the link in the live chat. And then afterwards, we'll enjoy some meditation. So good evening so far to Jens and Robin, and hello to other friends who are just watching right now. So I'll pass things over to Ayya, who will lead us in chanting.
All right, thank you, Bhante Sumano, and thank you all for joining us this evening. So we can start by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Yani da bhutani samagatani ummani vayani vantalike sabeva bhuta sumana bhavantu atopi sakaca sunantu basitam tasmani bhutani sameta sabe metam karota manusia pajaya divacharato chaharanti evalim tasmani nerakata pamata yang kincivitam idavahuram vasage suvayam ratanam panitam nano samamati tathagatena idampi buddhe ratanam panitam etena sacena suvati hotu kayam viragam mamatam panitam yada jaga satyamuni samahito natena dhammena samati kinchi dampi dhamme ratanam panitam etena sacena suvati hotu yang Buddha seto parivanai sucim samadhimanantarikan yamahu samadhina tena samona vijjati dampi dhamme ratanam panitam etena sacena suvati hotu ye pugala tasatam pasada chattari etani yogani honti te dakineya sugata sasavaka ete sudinnani mahapalani idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sacena suvati hotu ye supayuta manasa dalhena nikamino gotama sasanam hi te patipata matam nigaihalat Hamudani putim muncamana idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sacena suvati hotu
yatinna kilo patavim sito siya chatu bivate via sampakam piyo tatu pamam sa purisam vadami o arya sachani ave chapasati idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sacena suvati hotu ye arya sacani vibhavayanti gambira panyena sudesitani Kinchapi te honti pusapamata nate bhavam matamam mariyanti idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sacena subhati hotu Sahavasada sampadaya kaya sudhamma jahita bhavanti Sakaya diti vichiki chitancha silabatam vapiyadati kinchi Chatuhapaye hichavi pamuto chachabitana niababbokatum idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sacena subhati hotu Kinchapi sokamam karoti papakam kayena vacha udachetasava Pakampo sota sapati chadaya babata tapada sabutam Hidampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sacena subhati hotu vanapagumbe yata pusita gimhanamase patamasmin gimhe Tatu pamandam avaram adesayini Vanagamim paramam hitaya idampi buddhe ratanam panitam etena sacena suvati hotu varo varanyu varado varaharo anutaro dhammavaram adesayi Idampi buddhe ratanam panitam etena sacena suvati hotu Kinam puranam navam nati sambhavam virata citta yatike bhavasmim Te kina bija virulli chandani panti dirayatayam paripo idampi sanghe ratanam panitam etena sacena suvati hotu yani bhutani samagatani Mani vayani vantalike Tathagatam devamanusapujitam buddham namasamasuvati hotu Yani bhutani samagatani Mani vayani vantalike Tathagatam devamanusapujitam dhammam namasamasuvati hotu Yani bhutani samagatani Mani vayani vantalike Tathagatam devamanusapujitam sangham namasamasuvati hotu etena sacavajjena dukkha upasamentu te Etena sacha vajjena payamupasamintu te. Etena sacha vajjena rogavupasamintu te.
All right, and we can get into a comfortable seated position. And when we're ready, we can close our eyes and take a few deep breaths. Relaxing the body as much as possible. Relaxing every point of tension from the top of the head to the tip of the toes. And relax the forehead. The jaw. The face. And relax the throat, the shoulders, the chest, the belly. Relax the arms and legs and feet. And relax the breath. And we can lift our attention to the breath and hold it there at the tip of the nose. Observing every in-breath and out-breath. In its natural flow without forcing it to be anything other than it is. knowing what is happening to the breath in every single moment. Whether it's long or short, subtle or close. We know because we're present with it. Right, so you can relax, stretch your body if you need to.
All right, so thank you, Ayya Soma. And welcome to some more friends joining in. So, hello, Elaine, Ned, and Shadow of Label. um, Shadow of Label saw Stan's kitty tail. Yes, Stan the cat is roaming around.
It's cat bonding. All our videos these days.
So Ayya Soma will share some words on Dhamma on the topic, the truth and conspiracy theories. So if at any time you have questions based on the talk, feel free to type them into the live chat, and Ayya Soma will address them at the end of the talk.
Right, thank you, Bhante. Sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namasami. So this evening we're going to talk about pretty heavy charged topic. Truth and conspiracy theories. Truth and conspiracy theories. It's interesting because in the suttas we see the word truth very often, and it is sometimes used in context that can create a bit of confusion, if you may. So a lot of times the Buddha talks about, not a lot of times, all the time, the Buddha talks about the Four Noble Truths. And a lot of times the Buddha talks about attachment to views. So releasing or encouraging us to release our attachment to what we think is true. So only this is true, everything else is wrong. Is a recurrent passage that we see as he describes how we go about in this world, attaching to our idea of truth. And oftentimes we can take the latter as a sort of instruction not to hold any views at all, which means somewhat almost implicitly saying that pretty much any truth is possible. Any truth needs to be respected. Or we are looking, a lot of times we hear in spiritual circles, this is my truth, and this is your truth, and that's about it. That's the end. And so, how do we conciliate my truth, your truth, their truth, our truth with the Four Noble Truths? It's interesting because of the attachment to views, this sort of only this is true, everything is wrong. Oftentimes, it's in the suttas is actually connected to monastics, so that once we give up so many things, all we have left to attach to is our views. And so we get into all these like different debates, especially as Buddhist monastics. We have over the course of the past years, we've had so many different guest monastics coming through the door of Buddhist insights, and lots of different debates have come into being, even though we're in theory holding the same view. We're all Buddhist. Yet, even within the same view, you can have so many different views. So the Buddha says, once you let go of pretty much anything, like lay people tend to argue about worldly things, and then monastics only only argue about what they have left, which is only this is true, everything is wrong. Yet, we're seeing these days especially how it's not something that is only specific to us here in the monastery, but there's a lot of debates, a lot of statements. Actually, I don't know if there's actually really a debate. There is a lot of statements of what truth is and what truth isn't. And this can happen across the spectrum, actually. I've seen it. Lots of different beliefs, different religious beliefs, different political beliefs. Here in the US, we just had our first presidential debate last night. And it's a particular moment in history where this country is very divided. I am a foreigner, but I'm also a citizen now, so it's an interesting place to be. And there's a lot of, actually, even though I'm a foreigner, I feel very much at home, because everything that is somewhat the conversation happening, the political conversation happening in this country is very similar to the political conversations that happen, and that still happen to a certain degree in my country, but we're very in this very similar form in the past decades happening in Italy, with the same attitude, with the same way of discussing about beliefs. So what is the Buddhist perspective in all of this? How do we identify what truth is? What is our relationship to truth? And how do we identify it from falsehood? And I would suggest, actually, before we get into these questions, in somewhat looking at the work that needs to be done, and that the working hypothesis that we have here in Buddhism, which is that fundamentally we're all rooted in ignorance, rooted in delusion. And it's a very refreshing, actually, reminder when talking about truth, because it creates the conditions for a sort of humbleness to appear in the mind. So if there is ignorance in the mind, then there's also a sort of sense of that we don't know it all. There's some work that needs to be done, which creates a bit of humility rather than 100% sureness, confirmation of what our beliefs are. And when we talk about beliefs, then we should do a preliminary work of looking at where our assumptions are. Where are we coming to this? Why do we believe what we believe? What are the causes and conditions that create our thoughts and convictions to arise? And it requires a lot of courage, actually, to do this type of work. Because being humble, in fact, is a trait that very few beings that I have encountered in this life, at least, have. The most common is arrogance to one degree or another. And humbleness is actually a characteristic of people who actually know a lot, interestingly enough. I used to be a journalist for many years, and I interviewed so many different people. A lot of very successful people and a lot of like trying to be successful people, a lot of in between successful people, a lot of knowledgeable people, a lot of sort of con people pretending that they were knowledgeable. It was quite interesting how the more I was in touch with people who had experienced a lot of success due to the knowledge, due to the work that they had done, the more the humble they were. And the more they were actually sort of junior to something or trying to like kind of craving towards that success, the more confident, hyper confident, the more arrogant they were. It was a very interesting consideration that is also in both ways have his name on it. He has translated most of his teachings. He's one of the most famous Buddhist monastics, Western Buddhist monastics anyway. A treasure. Yet he has this incredible humbleness in him. And just like him, countless other beings you meet, Ajahn Brahm, also incredibly humble. Invited throughout the world, all over the world. And you meet him, he's incredibly generous with his time. If he needs some time to meditate, he'll just meditate wherever he is, never asking for special favors for the senior monk. We're at this conference in California, he didn't ask for a VIP room in the to be away from people and have an extra treatment because everybody was there for him. But no, just being there, content with what the conditions were. And always having that sort of attitude, being prone to openness of mind, to learning from others. Doesn't matter if they were ordained yesterday or ordained a million years ago or not ordained for that matter. It's very, very interesting, very remarkable traits. So we see this trait of humbleness. And then we see also the instructions that the Buddha gave us. How did he talk about truth? Or also how his disciples talk about how the Buddha talks about truth. We have a quote here that says, from Venerable Vangisa in Samyutta Nikaya 8.5, he says, truth indeed is deathless speech. This is an ancient principle. The goal and the Dhamma, the good say, are established upon truth. The secure speech with the Buddha, which the Buddha utters for the attainment of Nibbana, for making an end to suffering, is truly the foremost speech. So the reason why I picked this quote, which I find extremely beautiful, is for several different reasons. one ancient principle. One of the word, the goal, and the Dhamma, synonym for truth, are established upon truth. They're like a universal law, a principle. And the parallel with speech, being it the foremost speech, but also secure speech that the Buddha speaks with a particular goal, the attainment of Nibbana, so the cessation of suffering. So there is lots of keywords in this statement that first and foremost give some kind of weight, very important weight to the word truth. And at the same time, some keywords that, at least in my mind, helped really like evoke very important messages. So one sort of this idea, which we see in fact of the Dhamma, is not that the Buddha ever talks about, this is my opinion. So I found out these things and I think they're good. I don't know about it. I mean, they work for me. Maybe you can try it out. But rather, he always speaks about whatever he talks about is the foremost truth. He talks about it in the way that we would talk about the law of gravity. So it's not really a matter of belief, but rather it's a matter of discovery of a truth, of a law, of something that is profound, that is based, established upon truth. So he doesn't talk about it as belief. He doesn't use the word belief, but rather he talks about it in terms of, once again, truth. And truth is something that we can know or we cannot know. But whether we believe in it or we don't believe in it, it still is present. It still has its sort of consequences also in our lives. So we can see that with the law of gravity. We can decide whether to believe in it or not, but our life will still be impacted by the law of gravity. So whether we believe in it or not doesn't quite fit the fact, it's kind of missing the point. What we have to, the relationship towards gravity is understanding it, cultivating it, realizing it, seeing it, learning from it, and then establishing our lives so that if something falls from the roof, we know that it's going to hit us if we don't move. Right? We don't go like, oh, I don't believe in gravity. It will still fall on your head, the brick from the from the house. And in the same way, we see old age, sickness, and death that the Buddha talks about over and over again. They're not matters of belief or not belief. Even though I have a family member who doesn't believe in death, which was really interesting to me. He's convinced that he's not going to die, despite evidence of the truth. Despite everyone else dying on a regular basis around us, we can have these really weird beliefs. We can have the weird beliefs that we're not going to age, that our cream or plastic surgery or whatever intake surgery is going to age with us. We're just going to have both decrepit skin and decrepit plastic. The Tupperware that we've had here for 4 years, it's decrepit, has gone bad just like our skin. Everything is subject to the gratitude. So whether we believe in it or not, it's still going to happen. So my understanding of the teachings is that the Buddha talks about, makes a clear definition of truth. By that, he talks about the Four Noble Truths, which I won't repeat what they are because I assume that everybody is online, knows what they are. If you don't, put a question and we'll give an overview, a short overview. And then he talks about truth in the sense of truth to be attained, truth to be developed. And in this, he makes also, in this process, he makes some really interesting parallels, which is also what Venerable Van Liesam spoke about earlier. These parallels with safeguarding the truth. That a way to develop the truth is actually by safeguarding the truth and by practicing right speech, truthful speech. So, or better, not lying. He uses it in the opposite. So by not lying, we get more and more in sync with the truth. And we'll get there to this more depth in a second, because I have some beautiful sutta for you all, where the Buddha talks about this quite nicely. Another way through which the Buddha talks about the truth is going beyond the truth, which is what we call nibbana, or what we see in terms of also the simile of the raft, of that once we reach the shore, there's no need for the raft anymore. So we can let that go altogether. But in the process, because none of us are there quite yet, I believe, otherwise you probably wouldn't be listening to this talk, and you would be giving a talk and we'd have lots of followers here in the US, and I would be there listening to your talk. So in the process, before we're there, our duty is to do the work, to practice getting more and more in tune with the truth, and starting with the basis of the Four Noble Truths. So what we need to get in tune with. And when the Buddha talks about safeguarding the truth, he talks about it in terms of how do we relate to our beliefs, what we think, what are we talking about when we're presenting statements, in being quite clear, breaking down fundamentally the thought process behind it. So are we presenting something that is an opinion as a fact? Or are we even presenting a fact as an opinion? Or are we presenting something to others in a truthful manner? As in, is this, I have faith in this. So I tell Ayya Soma, I really have faith that this is true. But my faith is based on faith. So my statement is based on faith, rather than telling him this is how things are. But instead of me, how about we use the words of the Buddha? So he talks about in Majjhima Nikaya 95, he talks about several different ways through which we take certain stances. And he says faith, approval, oral tradition, reasoned cogitation, and reflective acceptance of a view. So I think reasoned cogitation, another word, is logical inference. And he says, these 5 things may turn out in 2 different ways here and now. Now, something may be fully accepted out of faith, yet it may be empty, hollow, and false. But something else may not be fully accepted out of faith, yet it may be factual, true, and unmistaken. Again, something may be fully approved of, well transmitted, well cogitated, well reflected upon, yet it may be empty, hollow, and false. But something else may not be well reflected upon, yet it may be factual, true, and unmistaken. So basically, for each one of the methods that we use, we have to admit that whether we go to it by faith, because we are approving of something, or because the tradition that we're in, the culture that we're in that says us that, or where we pick it upon, or if we start reflecting upon it, or we accept it out of logical inference. All of these can have 2 outcomes. Either they're actually based on truth, or they might not be based on truth. The Buddha tells us to intentionally actually go about it in this way. So reflecting on it and really seeing this is the 2 possible outcomes, and this is the source. And then he continues. It is not proper for a wise man who preserves, under these conditions, it is not proper for a wise man who preserves truth to come to the definite conclusion, only this is true, anything else is wrong. Why is that so? Because there are 2 possible outcomes. And then he's asked, so in what way is there the preservation of truth? How does one preserve truth? And the Buddha replies, if a person has faith, but he does not yet come to the definite conclusion, only this is true, anything else is wrong. In the same way, he says, I approve of something, I received it as oral tradition, I reached this conclusion based on reason cogitation, or on logical inference, or on accepting of a view. So being quite simple, quite simply like clear about the source of where our beliefs are coming. And the Buddha says, only in this way, there is the preservation of truth. In this way, he preserves truth. In this way, we describe the preservation of truth. So very, very important statements, and very clear. I love how the Buddha is extremely clear on the methods of really understanding where are we getting it from. And I feel like this process is so important because when we get it from, when we know where the source is, and we know that there are 2 possible outcomes, then our mind is more open to really reflecting and considering that there could be a possible outcome than the one that we think it is. And there's not anymore the attachment towards that particular view. It doesn't become a reflection of who we are. A lot of times we hold beliefs so strongly to these beliefs because they become a sort of projection of our identity, another way through which we define ourselves. But when we actually analyze our mind and we analyze our thoughts, we start seeing how actually they're the product of causes and conditions. And when we identify those causes and conditions, then it's okay to relinquish them if we see that they're not beneficial. Which is something, by the way, that the Buddha also goes into his instructions to Rahula, his son, in when going about truth. always checking our motives. So not only the sources where we're getting our beliefs from, our statements from, but also what are the motives behind it and what are the outcomes. And he gives some really incredible instruction in Majjhima Nikaya 61, one of my favorite suttas, as I always say, to his son, incredible instructions to really go to the deep of it, really reflect. So I'll read it for you. And he says, Rahula, when you wish the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Would this action that I wish to do with the body lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know, this action that I wish to do with the body would lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results. Then you definitely should not do such an action with the body. But when you reflect, if you know the action that I wish to do with the body would not lead to my own affliction, or to the affliction of others, or to the affliction of both, it is a wholesome bodily action with pleasant consequences, with pleasant results, then you may do such an action with the body. And he says the same for speech, action with the speech and an action with mind, the same exact breakdown. And he concludes, Rahula, whatever recluses and Brahmins in the past purified their bodily action, their verbal action, and their mental action, all did so by repeatedly reflecting thus. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the future will purify their bodily action, their verbal action, their mental action, all will do so by repeatedly reflecting thus. So reflecting on why, the motives, the intentions before we do an action, during an action, and after an action, and both actions of body, speech, and mind, all three. And the Buddha says that none of the people in the past who have attained awakening, none of the people right now who are attaining awakening, and none of the people in the future who will attain awakening, none of them have and will done so without investigating thoroughly the intentions of body, speech, and mind, and the outcomes. So it's something true and beneficial using the parameters of the Four Noble Truths. Using the parameters, is this leading to suffering, or is this leading away from suffering? And that's where we can start really understanding, breaking down even further our experience, our beliefs, our understanding of the situation. We see that it's just not something that it belongs to us, but it's the product of causes and conditions, and also has lots of consequences on ourselves and others. And if those consequences are harmful, or are not rooted in compassion, then it's a good idea to let them go. If they're wholesome, then it's something that needs to be cultivated. But it always has to be ourselves and others. It always has to be leading towards the cessation of suffering. So there's no such thing as, the Machiavellian way of doing things in Buddhism. There is no fine justifica i mezzi. The end, is there a way to say it in English? I don't know. No matter the means, the goal is
the end justifies the means.
The end justifies the means. There you go. Or in Italian, fine giustifica i mezzi. So yeah, there is no such thing. There is no such thing as the cessation of suffering, with a lot of means that lead to suffering. And that's when we can start by looking at our mind, looking at our experience, we can start distinguishing what is truth and what is conspiracy theory. How are we going about it? How are the effects? Are we engaging in conversations with, or are we taking up beliefs, or are we taking up ideas that we're reading or that we are hearing from our friends and peers? How are we taking them? Where is our motivation? Where are they rooted in? And then we can see, oh, perhaps this doesn't have the solidity that I thought it was. This is not necessarily something that I need to identify with. This is not necessarily beneficial. This is actually perhaps obscuring me, obstructing me from awakening. Holding these beliefs is harming lots of different people. Or perhaps we can actually enter in a conversation with people with the idea, the genuine openness that they might be right. No matter how crazy their idea might sound to us, but rather coming with the stance, I'm here not to prove my point. I'm not here to humiliate them. I'm not here to show them and everyone else how ridiculous they are, but rather I'm here to have a genuine conversation on truth and really show why I am asserting what I am asserting, and being genuinely curious in seeing why they are holding that information. How are they doing it? And having a quite a mind open for change, which doesn't mean that that the view needs to be changed, but rather there has to be the openness for it, which creates the conditions for genuine dialogue to happen and for truth to appear. Well, of course, holding in every single moment sharp mindfulness, so clear understanding of what our emotional, for example, states are while we're discussing a particular subject, which is another indication of our motivations, of our interests, of something that is guiding us in a particular way or the other. And in that way, we can also have compassion for people, including ourselves, that we're here trembling together, engulfed in ignorance, and all trying to go to the far shore together, so we can be of help to one another rather than antagonistic to one another. So these are a few thoughts that come to mind. It was a bit of a stream of consciousness. I heard that I was supposed to talk about this subject a little bit with little advance notice. So I hope it made some sense. If not, you're welcome to say something.
So thank you, Ayya, for sharing. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And welcome to Melinda and John, as well as Gita Ratnaike. And Shadow of Label asks, is this all key to higher dimensional thought?
Is this all key to higher dimensional thoughts? What is higher dimensional thought? If you can explain, give a definition of higher dimensional thought, then I can give a better answer.
And if anybody else has any comments or questions, feel free to type them in at this time.
Three, 2, 1.
Shadow of Labels taking a moment to explain. John asks, how is Ajahn Stan?
Ajahn Stan is doing significantly better. He was enjoying bombing our, well, my meditation, definitely, for sure. It's quite interesting meditating with him, hopping several times on my body. It's great mindfulness of the body.
And I'm not sure if Shadow of Labels explaining. But in the meantime, thanks everyone for joining in. So tomorrow morning, Ayya Soma will be back discussing the sutta with Channa tomorrow morning. And then in the evening, it will be a special event of sorts. So we've come to the end of the traditional Rains Retreat, which is a 3-month period of dedicated practice for the monastics and all the lay residents, actually, that were staying with us during the time. So tomorrow evening, there will be chanting, meditation, as well as talks from all of the residents. So not just Ayya Soma, but also Bhante Sadaso, who will be emerging from retreat, Bhante Pamuto, myself, Bhante Samano, as well as our lay resident, Antoinette. So you will get 5 talks for the price of none. Free. So join us then if you can. And then on Friday, Bhante Siddhasa will be giving a sutta study, and then we'll have monk chat on Friday evening. All right. So John asks, how are the venerables there on the last day of Vasa, eh?
We're doing all right. We're still alive. We haven't killed one another.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no hatred. There's a little bit of greed, a little bit of delusion, but
progress.
Progress, yeah. But definitely going towards awakening.
Yeah. So Shiloh of Labels said higher dimensional thought, meaning 10 realms. Not sure if that helped explain. So to rephrase that, the question would be, is this a key to thought of the 10 realms? Rebirth?
Rebirth? I'm not quite sure. I still get what you mean. But I don't think we necessarily even have to think about rebirth. I mean, we can always think about rebirth. Rebirth is always birth, you know. But as I see, actually, my experience of rebirth is, once again, not necessarily something that necessarily is applicable to this body at what we call birth and then what we call death. But you can see so many different births and rebirths. It's just a convention that we kind of fixate on the birth of the body. Whenever I was born 39 years ago, and whenever I will die physically at the end of the decrepitude of this physical body. But fundamentally, I actually don't even remember when I was born. So is that an act of faith? Yeah, I actually have faith that I was born the day that my mother told me I was born. But does anyone even remember the day they were born? So how can we be so sure? How are we so attached to even this like sort of weird belief? And do we even remember when we were 1 year old or 2 years old? And is that body exactly the same as the one that we have right now? Well, according to the pictures that I have faith in, being me, well, it's a radically different body. And the mind that I had as a child is radically different than the mind that I have right now. So, and without even having to go actually to when I was a little child, even the mind that I had 4 years ago, or even actually 1 week ago when I got full ordination, actually even 1 second ago, is radically different. So we are experiencing rebirth in every single moment. We're experiencing karma in every single moment. So the sort of span is, I really like actually how Bhakti Sutta also talks about it in terms of micro and macro evolution. Nobody here has ever seen dinosaurs, but we all have an understanding that dinosaurs have been here. And how do scientists, how have they actually come to that understanding? By studying microevolution, so what is currently present in front of us. So it's the same thing with karma and rebirth. We can experience it in this lifetime, really watching, looking at our experience, and then from there deducing, having a sort of more macro evolution of it. And then you stop obsessing about the sort of conventional birth and the conventional death, because realistically there's constant stuff in our body that is constantly dying, and constant stuff that is rebirthing, that is reborn. So when it comes to thoughts, that's the same exact thing. But anything that that I share tonight is applicable right here, right now, as well as in a sort of more macro state of being. So it's always relevant. And the Dhamma that the Buddha taught, so the truth that the Buddha taught, the reason why it's applicable, we don't even have to be so clever about it. But really, how many things have we read in our life from 2,500 years ago that are still relevant today? Like, seriously. I mean, even stuff that was relevant last year is not relevant this year. Even Shakespeare, you read it and you're like, well, I mean, this part, yes, but this other part, not quite. Right? Like, there's always some part that is kind of dated. And actually, the parts that are not dated in Shakespeare is because there are some sort of glimpses of Dhamma. As I used to say, actually, my Dhamma before the Dhamma was literature, because each one of these sort of poets, artists, you name it, have always been in search, going for the search of truth and finding little glimpses of truth here and there. And then when you find the Dhamma, if you're into that, if you were searching for that in the art world like I was, and then when you find the Dhamma, all your interest in the art like goes outside the window, because everything is condensed, it's included. It's so beautiful, it's complete. And you can see it. The truth has this incredible taste, flavor. But then we need to realize it for ourselves. So it's no different than, once again, we have the intellectual understanding of death. But it's very different to have an understanding of what death is. We have an intellectual understanding of old age and sickness, but very different to have an understanding of old age and sickness. So that's what we're trying to do with practice. That's why the Buddha was so compassionate to give us really specific ways, not like, oh, figure it out. Yeah, just believe in me. Yeah, this is like the truth. But no, actually, how are you going to develop truth? How are you going to get in tune? So I love the beauty, once again, of safeguarding the truth by not lying. So getting more and more in tune, which is such a beautiful reflection, because if you think about it, that's why we're so off tune. So a lot of times we think of, oh, it's not really a big deal to white lie or whatever it is. And in fact, it is not a big deal in the sense that it doesn't, if I tell Antoinette that this cup is red and she hasn't seen it, it's not a big deal. Like, her life won't be affected by whether or not this cup is red or white, right? I'm going to tell her, hey, Antoinette, I have a red cup in my room. Her life won't be affected. So you can say this has a sort of irrelevant, it's kind of a trivial thing to do. But the effects on my mind is what is the Buddha is talking about. By saying that this is red, I am creating a separation between myself and the truth. I'm not safeguarding the truth. And you create, the mind becomes more and more, whatever we think, whatever we do, is basically the color and flavor of the mind. So the more we lie, the more we are creating the karmic tendencies to be more and more distant from what we treasure, from what is good, from what is wholesome. And that's why the practice of non-lying then brings us more in tune, in sync with it. And it's beautiful. I have to see it personally practicing this way. You see the shifts in the mind. You see how it's also difficult to lie. And if a white lie comes in that you blabber it without thinking too much, then there is that regret that comes up, and you have to confess it straight away. To go like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean this. It's a harmful habit. But the sense of like, not that unhelpful guilt, but rather how do you call it? Like something that really propels you and goes like, this is harmful. This is not beneficial for my mind. This creates suffering. This doesn't create happiness. So let me correct that. That is a little stain that needs to be polished. I think it's such a beautiful, beautiful way to be. Tomorrow is going to be the Upasaka, aside from the end of the rains. And it's this beautiful also holiday, actually, for Buddhist people, lay people, and Buddhists, really, where normally, traditionally, they practice the 8 precepts. And how the Buddha describes it is that basically for a day, you're practicing like an arahat. Like in the way you're you're fine-tuning yourself to practice just like an arahat, like an enlightened being. So in a way, it's kind of like fake it till you make it, and then you're right to the truth. To use a wordplay. But really, realistically, what we're doing is, once again, taking the flavors and tasting them and getting like, oh, this is quite nice. This is quite good. And we can see it actually sometimes in, say, kids, if they've been exposed to so much sugar and like chemical things and whatever, and they only have a craving for McDonald's and junk food and Little Debbie's, right? And then you give them some sort of wholesome, really good food, and they're like, ew, I don't want that. But then after a while, if that's the only thing they have access to, they start detoxing from all the crap that they've ingested. And there is a good, wholesome craving for the wholesome food. Because the innate response of the body is to crave, not in terms of wanting, in terms of desire, but in terms of needing. This is need. This is good for me. Happy. This makes me strong. This makes me want to, live a better life. So it's the same thing with the precepts. The same thing with, taking these practices, becoming more and more similar to an enlightened being. Then we're like, oh, this is quite nice. This is pretty good. Bhakti Sumano was sharing. I'm gonna throw you in. he has recently ordained, and the idea that he had, he was sharing, and which is, I don't know why I'm quoting him, but it was exactly the same, my experience as well. The idea that we have a monastic life is radically different than the practice, the life as a monastic. Because we start going like, oh, actually, this is pretty good. It's pretty neat. Yeah, because we're trying to practice like enlightened beings. So we're getting more and more close to the wholesome, to sanity. And we're like, oh, yeah, actually getting drunk like multiple times a week. Not that he was getting drunk multiple times a week, but but whoever it was, maybe I was. Maybe it's not particularly beneficial. It's actually not even fun. It's not something that I miss. Actually, nah. Smoking a pack of cigarettes a night, actually not really, not fun. No craving, no desire has been extinguished. But dwelling in peace, calm, that's pretty neat. When I'm successful at it, that's great. So yeah, we tune our minds with it. Okay, so I think I gave another minute of a talk answering your question.
And Jens had a question as well. How do you recommend responding when others attempt to engage us in conspiracy theories? For example, that the pandemic is fake. I usually don't respond, but sometimes I feel that some ideas are dangerous, so I should, because not responding is almost like agreeing with what is being said.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that question. So I feel like there are two things about that to say on that. Once again, to practice what we preach. So if someone comes up with us with whatever crazy theory, to always give it the benefit of the doubt in the way of like being open to the fact that they might be right, even though it's completely crazy what they're presenting to us. So in creating that openness, guiding them in with the instructions that the Buddha gave us. So step by step, going, where is this based upon? But with a natural interest, like not natural, like a really intentional interest, like really true interest in what they have to say. So not shutting them down. All the times whenever we hear crazy things, we're like, that's absolutely insane. And I'm the first one, by the way. So I'll just go like, that's completely crazy and you're insane, shut up. And nobody got time for that. So what does that do? That creates tension, that creates hostility, where just as you are not interested in engaging, the other person is not interested in engaging. So what is helpful, on the other hand, if we're really trying to practice in this way, is sitting down and helping the other person break down their experience and really understanding that perhaps things are not as solid as they are. But there has to be a lot of times when we get into these debates, there's the want to, I'm smart, you're not. I'm going to show you how dumb all your theories are. And that's not really helpful or welcoming. As Buddhists, we probably had that also happen in us being the other way around, and people trying to shame us on our practice or perhaps ridiculize what we're doing. Like, oh, you're not eating after noon, like what, like seriously? So we know we can reflect on how it is when we find something precious or comforting when people are trying to take that away from us. So that's when we can practice compassion, even if someone has really bizarre idea. But then the Buddha also talks about whether someone is fit to talk or not. So now we're kind of close to the end, but actually maybe we can talk about it tomorrow during Sutta class. Because if I remember correctly, that Sutta has something has a good connection actually with whether someone is fit to talk or not. And from there, from those instructions of the Buddha, then we can understand, we can make the appropriate response, whether, yes, right now it's appropriate to continue this conversation, to engage with discussing with this person, or right now this person is not fit to talk. So it's a waste of time, and perhaps it's actually counterproductive too. And that's why the Buddhist teachings are so helpful, because they are never kind of theoretical. They never go like, oh, yes, look for the truth. All right, good luck, everybody. Or, oh, yeah, just, talk with your enemy. Good luck. But rather, the Buddha gives us practical instructions that we can follow through and check in every moment of our experience, our intentions, how we're doing it, and what are we basing things on?
Great. So thank you, Ayya Soma, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight. So we'll be back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. So join us then, and we can end with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
All right. Have a great night.